Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Serious Strategy Gamer, and we will be starting a new series today of Rule the Waves 2. Rule the Waves 2, of course, is the successor to Rule the Waves 1, which was a game which I very much enjoyed. Both of these games are ship design and naval warfare simulators, so expect quite a bit of naval warfare in this, of course. So the game really has two parts. Firstly, you'll be playing in naval battles, so you'll be controlling battleships, carriers and all of that in naval battles against other nations. But most importantly, the central aspect of the game is actually the ship designer. So in between wars, you'll be designing ships, and these ships will then fight out the aforementioned battles. So that's going to be very interesting. I should say, though, the game doesn't have the best of graphics. It's a little bit like Harpoon 3, just for an earlier period. Rule the Waves 2 in particular does extend the time period, so well into the carrier age, whereas I think the original one ended in 1925 or 30 or so, but yeah, way earlier than 1955. Right, let's go ahead, start a new game. The game does give us two options here. We'll be starting in 1920. And you can already see the graphic quality of the game, so this is pretty much the graphic style. You can play different nations, they all have different sort of advantages and disadvantages. Of course, the United Kingdom was a very interesting choice. Japan would be an interesting choice, which we might try out later. Soviet Union would also be interesting, but we are going to play as the US of A. So we'll be a liberal democracy. That means we have some less options, but we do have a pretty good naval budget and some rapid economic growth. I actually wonder, so the UK still has the bigger naval budget, and that is certainly going to be a challenge. So we will be at this point trying to, pretty much take over the world with our technological leader, with our rapid economic growth, and most importantly, by trying to make use of the carrier. The United States were one of the first nations to come up with the carrier concept and implement it heavily, in particular in a couple of fleet exercises. So let's see what we can do over here. We will be starting simply as the US. We'll have 6 opponents: Germany, the UK, France, Soviet Union, Japan and Italy. So the diplomatic aspect will be somewhat randomized, so we'll be fighting against all of these at some point. And of course we're going to be called the Serious Strategy Gamer. And we're going to be playing with medium fleet size, otherwise it just gets a little bit too large to manage. We'll not be playing with varied technologies, which is very interesting. So that means you don't actually know what technologies are going to do. But since this is my first game, I don't precisely know what everything is going to be happening. So we'll be playing with the Treaty of Versailles effect, and we'll be playing with the historical Washington Treaty. So there will be some limitations as to what we can build. And let's jump right into the game. So this is the main interface, and it will populate our... Okay, sorry, here we are again. The game just briefly hung up on me. So this is the main... this is the main screen of the game. I know it's Excel the game, but it is fairly interesting because there's a lot of story behind all of this. And we'll be trying to make sense of all of these numbers here very soon. But yeah, we do have some other map modes, so in particular the map itself, you can see all of the possessions. You can also see that the US, of course, does have some Pacific possessions, some in the Caribbean, there are the Philippines, but not much more. This is really still the high age of the colonial empires, and of course a very aggressive Japan, so we'll be trying to take that into account. We also should note that the Brits still do own a couple of possessions, in particular in the Caribbean, but also in our home area here on the North American East Coast. There are different tabs over here: the ships in service, the ships under construction, which is, as you would guess, the ships that we'll be getting hopefully very soon, submarines, some coastal fortifications, and a tally of the ships sunk and so forth. Right, let's look at this. So firstly, down here we have the budget. Our annual budget is about 170 million, translates into a monthly budget of 14. We are paying 9 million for maintenance, we are paying 7 million for construction, we are paying 1 million for research, and that does leave us in a negative monthly balance, which we'll be eating into our funds very soon, unless we do something about this. So here you can do certain things about this. The first thing to look at, of course, is research, because it is a game and research does make sense. You can set a total percentage of your budget as going to research. We're going to spend the maximum of 12%. There are some diminishing returns, but I think that's going to be fine. We should also look at the naval guns. We do have various naval guns from 2-inch to 17-inch available, although the 17-inch ones do suffer some quality issues. So the best guns actually that we do have, I think, would be the 16-inch guns. Let's think about what we want to prioritize over here. There are various research areas that we'll go into more detail later on, but I do think just generally naval guns, you know what, actually that should be probably a medium priority. On the other hand, shipboard aircraft aviation, I want to have this on a high priority, even though we won't be able to do that, as you'll see in a second, but still I think this would be a very nice thing to have. Right, other than that, I do think hull construction, just ship design is usually a good thing to prioritize very strongly. On the other hand, light forces and torpedo warfare, we're going to slightly decrease the priority for these, so this is just the question of how much money you will be spending on various different things, but yeah, we'll have to see about that. Submarines, I also think we're going to put a low priority on these guys. Anti-submarine warfare technology I think is fine. Explosive shells is fine. Fleet tactics is fine to keep all of these on medium. Maybe we can do aircrafts with a little bit of a higher priority, although I don't think it's that crucial for the early game. Certainly in 1920 aircraft carriers weren't much of a thing. So right, that being done, let's look at our ships that we've got. So our ships are currently sorted by type. BB is a battleship, so the most mighty of all ships that we do have around. You can see the name of the ship, the class of the ship, so we do have two battleships of the Montana class, the Montana itself, the lead ship, and the Oklahoma. Both of these have a displacement of about 19,000 tons, a speed of 21 knots, no anti-submarine warfare capabilities really. They were built in 1911. They are currently stationed in the North American East Coast in the active fleet. They have a fair crew quality. Their maintenance is about $300 per turn, so that goes into the overall maintenance. And here's a brief description, so we know that they have 10 12-inch guns and 10 3-inch guns and 2 torpedo tubes. And we can of course click at this, and here we should see the 10 12-inch guns, which are in turrets of 2 guns each. So this is the layout. We can also see the 10 3-inch guns. Oh, we actually can't see them, but they'll be going along the sides over here. There's also a description of the armor, but all of this is really a summary. If you really want to look at what the ship is doing, we could open the design thing for the ship, and this is really the most fun aspect of the game, and doesn't it look like fun? So over here we'll be spending quite a bit of time, but it's amazing just to think about how much thought just goes into this design. So here you can change the main caliber guns, you can see where they can fire, and that will all be relevant in battle. So you can see that of course these wing turrets over here, which are called port and starboard wing in position F, would be able to fire on the side, but you can add various different turrets. They are all on various different stages, so that's very interesting. They have directors, so this is the fire control. They carry a certain amount of ammo. We have secondary guns. We even have tertiary guns, at least in theory. And we do have the torpedoes over here, so that's interesting. And we do have a lot of information about the armament of this ship in total. So yeah, these are just the battleships. After the battleships, we have various different types of battleships in the New Jersey class, New York class, Delaware class. All of these are battleships denoted by the BB. We have a couple of battle cruisers from the San Diego and Rochester class, apparently. These battle cruisers, they're typically a little bit faster than battleships. They might be a little bit less well armed or a little bit less armored. These are really horrible ships, actually. Just 6 11-inch guns. So lower caliber guns, fewer than the battleship, and pathetic armor. 7-inch isn't really not that much. On the other hand, they are fairly fast, so they can probably run away from a battleship. The Rochester class here might be a little bit better. 8 12-inch guns. That's not quite as much as the 10 and 12-inch guns over here, but you can see the layout is a lot different. So all of these can actually contribute to broadside, and this armor is actually decent, so that's cool. We also have 2 heavy cruisers from the Pittsburgh class. We'll talk about these later. A couple of light cruisers and a couple of destroyers. All of them have different displacements. You can see these ships over here are typically classified as heavy ships. Everything from a heavy cruiser onwards, so CA denotes a heavy cruiser, CL a light cruiser, and you can see there's a pretty high gap actually in the tonnage between these two. So even the heaviest light cruiser that we have is about half the tonnage of a heavy cruiser. And then we do have the battle cruisers, and they start much higher than that. We also have 2 battleships of the Michigan class, which really look horrible. So these are pre-Dreadnought battleships, so even from, well, basically before the big revolution, about the main inch guns, the main caliber guns were coming into play. So these only have 4 12-inch guns, very under-armored, very old and obsolete ship by now. And even the game does consider them obsolete, as you can see by these little denotations of O. So, various different other things. Most important, speed, displacement. I think these are the most important things to keep in mind, of course, in addition to the class. Now, we should go into a little bit of detail into each of these, but one important thing is that we are subject to the Washington Naval Treaty. So, in between or after the war, the main nations did come into an agreement that they wouldn't develop any new heavy battleships. There are some under constructions, and I think these will finish, including the Arizona class here with 15-inch guns, so much better than we currently have, even in a very innovative layout, I think. Also with, this is a much better ship than anything that we have right now, so we'll be happy to build these. But yeah, we'll also have to make do with what we've got over here. And you can see by this little O that a lot of our ships are actually considered obsolete. So yeah, we'll have to think about that. And I do think the first thing that I do want to do is take a look at the Michigan class over here. So let's open this for a rebuild, and let's do actually something very drastic. So this is the layout of the ship. Of course, we know it's a pre-Dreadnought battleship of very low displacement actually, very low speed, decently armored, I would say. Very bad guns. You can even see these are old guns, so they have a quality modifier of -1. Even carrying some torpedoes. But I want to convert this into our first carrier. Now the reason for that is you cannot actually prioritize research into carriers as we did over here if we are if you don't have a carrier. So basically this simulates the fact that most nations didn't really come into the carrier concept just from the scratch. They were converting older ships before that, so this is exactly what we're going to do over here. We could also pick one of our battleships or some of our battleships for that, but I do think there's a limitation in that the first conversion that you need to do must be below 16,000 tons. So we could viably choose the San Diego class battlecruiser over here. And there's something to be said about that because it's fairly fast, it doesn't have much armor, so it's actually fairly useless, I think, to me. Also the armament isn't that great, so let's think about whether we want to pick the very old ships or the slightly more modern ones. So this is a very small ship, unfortunately, but yeah. So the first thing that we'd need to do to convert this into a carrier would of course be to rip out all of these gun turrets. So both of these, we'll just clear both of these turrets and that's going to be fine. And we're going to remove all of these torpedo mounts, so because I think just it would be a bit silly to have torpedo mounts for a carrier. We're going to introduce a flight deck, and we're going to introduce some air capacity here to simulate the fact that we are carrying aircraft. Here you can see the breakdown of the weight of the ship. So overall we have a displacement of 13,000 tons. About 4,000 of that goes into the hull and fittings. About 1,000 goes into the machinery. About 5,000 go into total armor. Armament still about 1,000 tons. And accommodation space, so space for the crew, is about 500. And that does leave us at slightly below the nominal displacement that we have. So we can only carry 200 more tons. So let's add one more aircraft, and that should bring that down mostly to where we can be. We could add another aircraft, but that would put us under the total, so that wouldn't be exactly great. Now there are some further considerations that we can make. So firstly we should check this, and this will tell us that ship identified as a light cruiser, light carrier. Do we want to change the type from a pre-dreadnought battleship to light cruiser? Yes, that is what we would like to do, and you can see that the game does give us some warnings over here. So firstly, a carrier with speed below 20 knots must have at least one catapult. We haven't researched catapults yet, so we must actually make sure to get over 20 knots. We could also use oil fuel, which we would have available. We cannot have secondary guns, and we have too many secondary guns. So we'll get a modifier there. So the first thing is to actually remove all of our secondary guns, and it would then tell us that we can't have tertiary guns either, so let's also remove all of these. That does give us some weight. But we do have to think about the speed. Now, I can't actually influence the speed because this is an old ship. In a newly designed ship, we could manipulate that a lot easier. But in this case, we would actually need to make a replacement to the machinery. And that will drastically change the build costs or rebuild costs that we see over here. So, yeah, but we'll just simply have to do this. This is a very old machinery. We'll have to do a total refit over here. We're going to press that button and you can see just the build cost went up by 4 million there. So this is a very drastic change. And now, of course, we can increase the speed up to at least 20 knots over here, as we can see. So this would be 10 million. We'd still have some weight remaining, so we could either increase the speed, but that would put up costs dramatically. Of course, we can simply use a couple more aircraft over here, and I think that should be fine. So yeah, this would allow us to build a decent carrier, I would say. Very small carrier, only 20 aircraft. It's a light aircraft carrier. It's decently armored actually. So why not? Oh, we could also think about including some torpedo defenses. Oh, apparently we can't. We could include bulged. And apparently that would reduce... I think there's a bug over here. This is weird. This should not... Well, I think I'm going to ignore this for a second. So let's check this. So this would be a legal design, and I think it's actually pretty good. So this would cost us about 10 million to rebuild, and would give us a 20 knot carrier with an aircraft capacity of 20. So let's actually save that. We don't want to rebuild it right now, because I would also like to check the San Diego class, whether we could rebuild this. And the drill would be somewhat the same. We'd clear all turrets and basically rip out all weaponry from this light aircraft, including all of these torpedo mounts, because they are just silly. And we could include a couple of, well, we'd need a flight deck and a couple of aircrafts, let's say 20. The speed here would actually be sufficient, so I think that would actually be great already. We wouldn't even need to replace the machinery. So we could actually carry more aircraft over here. Up to 24, and it would be a much faster ship, and the rebuild cost would be totally negligible. This is just 1 million compared to 10 million for the battleship. A much better conversion, I would think. Doesn't have quite as good armor, mind you. It's not quite as important, and the main reason for that is that we are starting from a very fast ship already. Now the question is this a worthwhile ship for us? It could be pretty good at hunting light cruisers or something like that. But the belt armor, it's really bad, and the 11-inch guns, 12 6-inch guns, that's not bad. 11-inch guns. 11-inch guns really aren't that great. Yeah, of quality 1. We can look at the gun data, and we can see that even at extreme ranges of 20,000 feet, it would still be able to penetrate 6.5 inches of belt armor. So pretty much the belt armor that it does currently have could be penetrated at a very long range. And we are expecting much better ships to be facing us. At least capital ships. I'm really tempted to convert these guys into light crew carriers. They could have a very long and useful lifetime as light carriers. On the other hand, these Michigans, they're not worthwhile anything currently. So you know what we're going to do is we are going to rebuild the Michigan into a light carrier. That's going to be okay. The Illinois, also a battleship of the Michigan class, we're just going to scrap that. I don't think it's worthwhile to have that. We can't build big ships, but I think this is going to be fine and a very worthwhile replacement. We should also look at the Pittsburgh class over here, because that can be rebuilt. Oh, sorry, that is currently considered obsolete, and that does mean that the maintenance cost is somewhat too high. So we should actually see whether there's anything that we can build up over here. And just look at this very weird gun design with a forward and an aft gun turret of 2, and then 4 turrets with 1 gun each. Very, very weird design. It does have a good improved director. It does have 2 fire control positions, couple of calibers. I guess we could use a director on these ones. Director, so that would just be a small update. Not really worth that much. Do we have anything that is worthwhile? A better quality in guns? No, not really. We certainly wouldn't want to replace anything off the engine. Torpedoes I think would be fine, so we don't really need to do much there. Could install minesweeping gear, but then again, why would we? We could include flight capacity for just 1 aircraft. No, we couldn't. It would be too... weight would just be too much. So yeah, we don't really have that much weight to be playing around with. Could potentially increase the elevation of these guns. So that should give us a little bit more range. Yeah. You know what? I think this is a good update. So yeah, we don't want to update the engine, so that's going to be fine. So we're going to pull both of these guys in for rebuild. It's not going to be very expensive. Just $1 million in total. And it's going to reduce our maintenance cost, and that's going to be fine. Good. Same actually here for the light cruisers. We should really consider those. There's the Raleigh class. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And the Tuscan class. So let's look at this one first, because it's a little bit more modern, and see whether it's any good at all. Right, so it does have 6-inch guns, not too few of them. We can see that about 5 guns would be able to fire on each broadside. Improved directors, we could increase the elevation of these guns. Doesn't have any secondary guns. That's a little peculiar. But all in all, it's not too bad. We do have some torpedoes. Is this... It's a bit slightly overweight, but not too much. You can skip on a couple of tons, so this wouldn't be too drastic. Well, I guess what we could do is, well, either do more mines, but that would increase the weight, so that's not that great. We could also at least think about, just see whether we can do, let's pick F and G swivel mounts. Would those be considered legal? 3. Okay, so if we delete these mounts and include a 3 torpedo swivel mount. So where is it? Forward, C, and no. Forward center line. Really? Forward center line. Would that be legal? Center line mounts can only be done on smaller vessels. Okay, so let's take F and G with 3 torpedo tubes. Would this be considered legal? Well, in general, but the weight is just too much. So, on the other hand, if we delete this and delete that mount, we'd still be overweight, but only by a little. Could reduce ammo, but that wouldn't be necessarily enough to do this. Now the advantage of the swivel mounts is that they have a much greater flexibility. So they can be firing, let's say, in this direction, whereas underwater turrets or underwater torpedo mounts would only be able to fire in a very, very specific angle. So I'm not convinced they'd be too great. But there's not that much that we can save weight on, so actually this might not be worthwhile. Which is a little bit, it's a little bit sad. Actually, you know what? These ships are slower than their design speed. That's what I realize over here. But yeah, very unfortunate. I don't think this is something that we should do because they'd be too much overweight, I feel. I mean, this is 80 tons out of 5,000. That's not quite enough, I think. We could play around with the turret armor. But basically the secondaries we don't have any secondaries, do we? No. This is not a lot of turret armor. The weight of well, most weight actually goes into machinery and hull fittings. Armament. It's not a very good design, I have to admit. Yeah, but probably it's just not possible to... You know what, we could potentially do fewer torpedo mounts. It wouldn't be great. It's not the best choice I think that we can do over here. But what if we do 2 guns per turret? Or 2 torpedo tubes? Ship is slightly overweight. You know what? Slightly overweight, I can live with that. Let's do it. Yes. And we're going to rebuild you as the Raleigh. Thank you. And both of these guys will come into rebuild as well. Very nice. Right. So that does leave some other categories over here. I think I'm going to just go through them offline and just see what else we have. Well, the Tuscans, you know what? They are very, very slow. I'm willing to bet that these guys are pointless. Jesus, 4-inch guns. What are you? What are you good for? Are you even colonial or anything? No, you're not even fit for colonial service. And just 4 caliber guns? They have barely any penetration, so they might be very good against destroyers, but they can't catch destroyers, possibly not with this speed. So you know what, I think these guys we will be putting already in a mothballed state. And I think that's going to be okay. Now we do have these guys over here, which are also a little bit different. Ooh, these guys do already have swivel mounts, so that's nice to see. Just 1 gun though, or 2 guns. What a weird ship. Yeah, sometimes the game just decides to design very, very weird things. It's basically a torpedo carrier with a very high speed and not great guns and some mines. It's actually not that bad as a mine layer, I realize, but we only have 1 of those. Should probably rebuild it just to give it an update, and I think that includes increased elevation, which doesn't cost us anything, a director for the secondary guns, even though we don't have that many. We're certainly not going to upgrade any of the machinery or anything like that, so... Ship is overweight. Director for secondary gun is not developed. Okay, so I can't actually use this. Cramped accommodations, yes, that's fine. Cramped accommodation does mean that these guys will probably not be used anywhere but in home waters, but that's fine. Are you in mothballed? Yes, you're in mothballed state, so that's okay. And that does leave us with the destroyers. Which I think the old ones over here, we don't even need to look at these guys. They're very slow for destroyers, 26 knots. That's not a lot, so... And you're only carrying 2 torpedoes. We could use you for trade protection, so you know what, actually I think I'm going to open the design for a rebuild and not do anything of significance. So yeah, it's really not that good a ship, but it's going to be very, very cheap to upgrade, and that means we can then save on the maintenance cost, and that's going to be okay. So rebuild ship, yes, we're going to rebuild that to the 1920 standards. That's going to be alright. Right, these we might want to look at in more detail, but I think I'm going to wait for that until next time, when we'll also be thinking about designing some ships from scratch. We are of course very much in the red over here in the balance of our current funding, but that also includes some of the ships that we are currently rebuilding, so some of these costs will only be lasting for about 3 months or so that's not going to be too important. Some of these things we will be putting into a mothball situation and into the reserve fleet, so all of that should save a lot on the current spending. That being said, I think this is a very good place to put in a cut, so do leave a like and all of that for the new series of Rule the Waves over here that we are seeing. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and I do hope to see you next time when we will be building our own ships. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.